Hello there. Good morning. Thank you guys so much for joining us today here on the Revival Center YouTube page. We call this The Influence. I'm joined today, like we have been in this particular series, with Pastor Jason. Won't you just greet everyone?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing great today. Looking forward to jumping into our series, and I think we're wrapping it up today, correct?
Either today, we'll see how far we get. We may have one more.
Gotcha.
But yeah, this has been a very interesting topic because it deals with things that's happening right now.
Yeah,
it's happening
in
right
kind
now.
of our world, so.
Yeah. And then behind the camera there is Aaron Limbaugh. And so if you are watching this right now and you're watching this live, we would love to hear from you. You can make a comment in the chat section there on YouTube. And again, we would just love to connect with you in any way. So with all that being said, if you haven't already liked the video, please like it. Subscribe if you have not subscribed. That is how we gain influence as we talk about different topics here on Tuesdays that we would normally not talk about on a Wednesday or a Sunday. However, these are important things to discuss because it deals with things that we're all dealing with in our world today. And so this series that we've been in, I believe this is part 3, has been looking at the reason or asking the question, why do pastors fall from grace? Why do they fall with moral failure or whatever the sin is that causes them to fall and no longer be able to serve in that role? Because here in 2024, we have seen a rash of very popular, well-known pastors who have fallen due to various things over the last several months, again, since January 2004. And even while we're doing this teaching right now, I don't know if you saw it or not, it's a lesser known pastor in terms of America knowing who they are. Like pretty much everybody would know who Robert Morris is, but there was another church, another pastor in that same area, in that Dallas-Fort Worth area, that he had to resign this week as well.
No, I didn't miss that one.
So the news media there in Dallas, in the Fort Worth area, is now starting to track how many pastors have fallen in that North Texas area. And because you had Tony Evans in that area, you had Robert Morris in that area, you had this other guy, and I don't know his name. I personally didn't know him, but they had like 3,000 members in their church.
Oh, wow. That's kind of like what you talked about, what we talked about a couple weeks ago or last week. It affects the smaller churches, but still 3,000.
That's a huge church.
May not be a mega church, but
it's a mega church. A mega church is defined with I think 2,000 members.
Okay, well there you go, another one. But so that goes back to what we said, that this affects every church, every pastor, and it can be in all levels.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And now the media is just kind of, I guess they like hot flash, right? You know, hot.
Yeah. Because it's like, a lot of churches in that one area seem to be affected by this.
Yeah.
And so that's why we're talking about this. And again, we invite you to go back and look at part 1, look at part 2 of this series. We're just going to pick it up right here with part 3, as we're just, again, asking the question, why, is this happening? The easiest answer is, well, they're not reading their Bible, they're not being submissive, they're allowing pride to come into their heart, they're not holding themselves accountable. Yes, to all those, but we wanted to go a little bit deeper to try to understand the complexities of what it means to pastor and why it is so important for pastors to be humble and to pray and to read their Bible and to have accountability.
Absolutely.
Those are the reasons ultimately why someone may fall from grace in this capacity. But why? What's pushing them in that direction? And as we've kind of tried to lay out, is that it's hard. Pastoring is hard. And so if you don't have a good solid routine, if you don't have a solid commitment in terms of doing it the way Christ said to do it, then you are going to be set up for failure. Yep. So with that being said, we're going to pick right here with compassion fatigue. Again, why are pastors falling? Well, the job is hard. It's not easy. You have to do it God's way.
Yep.
You have to pray. You have to read your Bible. You have to have your own personal worship time. You have to lead your family well. Your marriage with your wife or your spouse has to be locked in, solid. You have to take care of yourself. You have to have a Sabbath. You have to have accountability. You have to have these things in place because of the nature of the calling. And again, picking up part 3, compassion fatigue. What do I mean by that? So many pastors are very used to just giving, that sometimes they don't know how to stop and to receive. And I will confess that this is a very true thing. And when pastors continue to give, and they don't do these things that we're talking about to receive, it makes them vulnerable to the temptations of the enemy. It makes them vulnerable to fall, where they would normally be strong and say no to the temptation, but because of this fatigue, they give in, and they may say yes because they're coping with this. They're looking for an escape of their current reality because they're a little burnt out, they're a little depressed, a little stressed out, and they're doing it in an unhealthy way. Yeah. So like when we go to a conference, as an example, district council, we call it network conference, or we're going to an experience conference. We try to go about 1 or 2 a year as a staff to get refreshed. And I will be honest, sometimes when we go, it takes me probably a day being there for me to ever stop giving and begin to receive.
Right.
Receive the worship, the sermon, all those types of things, because I'm still in go mode.
Yeah, you're so used to doing what you do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's worse as a pastor, just to be honest with you. Whenever I was a youth pastor, I gave a lot then. I mean, every Wednesday I was preaching or, doing first priority Bible study lessons for the teenagers. I mean, I was giving then, but on Sunday mornings, I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was able to sit there and receive a sermon. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't as bad. But as a pastor, I preach on Sunday and I preach on Wednesday. I do staff meetings. We do this, podcast, give
right.
all the time. And so it's a lot harder sometimes to receive it in that way.
Your adjustment sometimes, I'm sure you have to, like you said, take a day or so.
It does when you're at a conference before you can really stop and receive, So sometimes I have come to places where I was working so hard for so long that I actually felt guilty when I had some time off for rest, and I would literally not know how to rest. Especially early on in my ministry, when we would go on vacation, me and Amanda and the kids, like the first day, Monday or Tuesday, I'm thinking, man, I should be doing something. I should be texting somebody. I should be praying with somebody. I should be checking on someone. I felt bad for just taking time off. But the older I got, the more mature I became. I began to understand this a little bit more. I begin to recognize that if I want a healthy ministry, if I don't want to be the next one to fall, if I don't want my name in the newspaper and all that stuff, then I better learn how to do it correctly, I better learn that this ministry belongs to Jesus, not Jason.
That's right.
And that it's going to be up to the power of the Holy Spirit to do what He does. And this little Superman thing is not going to last very long. And so this was early on in ministry, in my 20s. And so as I begin to make those adjustments and I begin to understand how important it is to have those days off, I no longer feel guilty anymore. I will absolutely go on a hike on you.
Yes, yes.
And go and get out there in the woods and walk for 100 miles and not feel bad at all. So
yeah, well, I can speak just because now I've known you now almost 5 years, and I know how you are. So you are wired like I'm all in, baby, and so I could see how that would be hard for you as younger and a little bit more, in developing and things like that.
I wasn't as mature.
But even now, like there's still times, and I'm new to this
Yeah.
role, and it's like, man, I can go home now and even think, all right, well, I could do this at home that I didn't get accomplished today at the office.
Yeah.
But you just can't, because I've got 3 kids at home, and it's summer, and I want to go out and spend time and quality with them.
right.
But man, it can be so much, because we want to make sure that we do it, and we do it well,
Yeah.
and we do it excellent, not perfect, but excellent for the Lord. But I was reading in Nehemiah yesterday, and it talks when Nehemiah goes away and then he comes back, and he notices that on the Sabbath they're in the temple, they're selling, the gates are open, and he gets mad at them, and he's like, no, the Sabbath is here for the Sabbath. God gave us the Sabbath to rest. And it's just like, in the New Testament when Jesus flipped the tables in the temple. God gave us that day for a reason, and it's for us to kind of recharge, to rest, to worship, and we got to make sure we're doing it.
Like with the staff, for example, when you guys came back from Memphis, I was like, Jason, take Monday off.
Yeah.
Because Tuesday, when you get here Tuesday, it's going to be on like Donkey Kong because of the community connection stuff. And I knew that was coming.
Yeah.
And so it was important to take that Monday to get a little refreshing there, just to get your mind back right. But whenever I was coming up, I didn't have that.
Yeah.
I didn't have anybody really dictating to me, hey, listen, Jason, you need to calm down right here and go and do something else. I didn't have that. I figured it out.
Yeah, you've learned it from experience.
Through the hard way.
Yeah.
Reading books, trying to go and see other guys that are successful in ministry for a long time, the longevity of it. Because that's what I began to recognize, that the longevity of this is going to be found in your daily routine.
That's right.
In your weekly routine, your rhythm of calendar. You do not do this for 50 years and not have a major fall in your life if you don't do it the right way.
That's right. 100%.
And that's why these guys are falling, is because they're not doing it the right way. And they've been serving in their churches at a very high level for a long time. And it's like LeBron James right now. He's 39 years old, whether you like him personally or not. I'm talking about basketball, on the court stuff. So he's 39 years old. All right. For him to still be playing at the level that he's playing, at 39 years old, with his knees gone,
back hurting.
He has had to put in so much work behind the scenes. I read one article that he spends $1 million a year on his body.
Wow.
On his body. $1 million a year on his body.
And he don't have to. Like, look where he is at the stage of his career and what he's accomplished. But yet
he still does that. That's
it.
how he's had the longevity.
Yeah.
Is that he did what he had to do, because you don't have but so many jump shots in your legs.
That's right.
And so if you don't prepare, you don't have but so much of this in you as a pastor if you don't do it the right way.
That's right.
With the help of the Holy Spirit, and you got to be sold out to it. So God has placed sacred rhythms in our lives so that there would be regular times of refreshing and renewal. God calls the Sabbath a sign between us and Him. What is the sign? That He is God, and that our church or work will not fall apart when we take time off, because He is the one building the church.
Yeah.
And that is the lesson that we all have to learn because, again, of the fatigue factor.
I wonder how many pastors feel, and you can probably answer this too as a lead pastor, think that the doors are going to shut down when they take a vacation.
Yeah. It is, it's true, that is certainly there, especially early on. Again, in my 20s, I really did have that mentality, and it took a while for that to come out of me. Most pastors can trace burnout to not regularly replenishing their souls with rest, prayer, reading, fellowship, exercise, and caring for their emotional lives. And that is so very true.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So next point there is many pastors do not know how to build a dream team and have people operating outside of their gift mix. So you got to have a good team around you, right? You can't do all that you need to do by yourself, right? You just can't do it and do it well. So accurately placing people based on their giftings is one of the most important things in terms of releasing a pastor from some of their responsibilities in the ministry. God has called our churches to function as apostolic centers wherein all the ministry gifts of Ephesians 4:11, and that's the fivefold, the apostles, the prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers, that's the reference of that scripture, so that they can function so the work of the ministry or the oversight of the church is not dependent on any one person. I think about, I'm a history guy, and I know you are too, but I think about presidents throughout the history of the country. The best presidents weren't necessarily the guys that were the smartest.
Right.
Or had the most giftings. The best presidents always had the best cabinet. They always had the right guys and ladies in the right spot that knew how to lift them up in the areas where they were weak.
Yeah. I mean, you think about football as an example. Nick Saban on his staff had Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart is
considered what Kirby's done now
one of the
Georgia.
best coaches in college football right now. Kirby Smart. Well, that was his assistant.
That was his defensive. That's the guy that ran his defense.
Yeah, and so Nick Saban, he's a great guy, great coach, obviously, but
he had a great team around him. It's that same staff. He had Lane Kiffin as the offensive coordinator, Sarkisian. Look at all these guys now at head coaches and how successful they've been.
Right.
So this goes across the board, right? It doesn't matter really what job you have to have a good team around you, because there's no way that you can do it all the things good by yourself. You can make them and patch them and let them function, but are they functioning well? It's kind of like trying to put a Band-Aid on all the things. You're not going to do it great and not to the high level unless you have a good team around you.
That's right.
So the next factor, and this one just trips me out, man. Competition among churches or pastors.
No, does that happen?
No, unfortunately, it does. And I think back to Jesus' commandments to the disciples where he said, go and make disciples. He didn't say, Peter, you go make the biggest. Paul or James, you make the second biggest. John, you make the third largest. And then y'all get mad at each other if y'all don't have the same numbers. Right? But yet for some reason, we turn it into a numbers game.
That's right.
And it's sad, man. It doesn't matter if we're Methodist, Baptist, Pentecostal. If we're getting people to go to heaven, and if their name's written down in the book of life, that's the goal. And if we're doing well, and the Baptist church down the street's doing well, and people are coming to church, man, why are we jealous of that? So, unfortunately, many leaders are driven by that and not led by the Holy Spirit. They are driven by their need to feel significant based on the growth and success of other churches. And this is a serious issue that can lead to feelings of stress, depression, people being insecure.
That's right.
And so, like I said, it's just sad. When leaders in churches, they look for numbers to grow, it can be a sure sign that the leader is driven by more of an ego and insecurity than their God-given assignment.
Right.
And it goes back to what you said a few minutes ago. It's my ministry, not the Lord's. Right. And so, it once again blows my mind. Because of this competitive spirit, some pastors secretly celebrate. Check this out. They secretly celebrate when another pastor is struggling, when their church is struggling in the community, and sometimes that their church is blowing up and the other churches may be close to shutting the doors.
Right.
That's an unhealthy competition, and that's not what it's about.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, I think this is a very real thing that happens. Why is it there? Okay, so that's something that I like to analyze. Why is there this competitiveness between churches and things? I've always said that I'm in competition with nobody. The only thing that I'm after is trying to depopulate hell and populate heaven.
That's right.
I'm not studying other churches. I'm not trying to do what they do. I don't care. I mean, whatever. I have a specific calling that God has placed upon my life, and that's what I'm doing. So we're not like the BP or the Shell, or we're not McDonald's and Burger King fighting it out.
Yeah.
I try not to do outreaches and try to make it where a bunch of Christians come. The outreaches that we do is trying to get lost people to come. That's always been the focus and the goal of our ministry here at the Revival Center. But with that being said, why? Why is there this competitive nature? Well, if you go back to when Martin Luther nailed the thesis, this 95 Thesis on the wall, he wasn't wanting to start a new branch of Christianity. You have three branches of Christianity. You have Catholics, you have Orthodox, and then Protestants. We are part of that Protestant branch. Well, whenever Martin Luther did the 95 Thesis, again, his goal wasn't to start a new branch of Christianity. His goal was to reform the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. He was a Catholic. He wanted the Catholic Church to stop doing some of the things they were doing.
Yeah, become real corrupt.
Yeah. So the Catholic Church did not obviously embrace him, but they kicked him out. And so they were labeled protesters. So the Martin Luther group was protesters, which is where the word Protestant comes from. Mm-hmm. Protestant means protest. So from there, from that, we have 3,000 plus denominations that are all Protestant denominations from this protest that just split throughout the last several hundreds, almost 1,000 years. And so now we're here in America. Again, where does this competition come from? So now we're here in America, and you have all these different denominations, over 3,000. In any given city, you're going to have 10, 15, 20 different denominations. Mm-hmm. And of those denominations, you may have 5, 6, 7 different churches in that one denomination in that city.
That's right.
You have churches everywhere, especially in the South. So what happens is that it becomes, what flavor do you want today?
Of the week.
Do you want Mexican food? Well, there's 5 Mexican restaurants. Which Mexican restaurant do you want? Do you want a steak? Well, there's 5 restaurants that have a steak. Which one do you want to go to? And it becomes more about personal preference than it does about the actual gospel of Jesus Christ.
That's right.
But preference. You know what? Let's go to the First Church on First Avenue. Why? Because they have great coffee. Great coffee. So we're going to go to that church. What about their worship? I don't know. What about the word? He don't preach long. That's the word
out
about
12 o'clock, baby.
Yeah, so it's good coffee. Let's go there. So that is what happens. And then you take that mindset and you put it in our culture, which is very consumer driven. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, the reason you have this competitive spirit is because just like McDonald's is saying, we have the best hamburgers, and Burger King is saying, no, we have the best French fries, and that competitiveness now seeps into the church, and it becomes, well, I am good based upon how many people I can get to come to the church.
Right.
That is where I find my self-worth or success. And if it takes me advertising great coffee in the coffee shop, that's what I'm going to do. If it takes me shortening my services from an hour to 55 minutes to get you to come, that's what I'm going to do. And then whenever that starts happening and I'm giving a consumer product called Christianity and it starts working, and people from his church is now coming to my church, he's going to be like, wait a minute, you ain't going to be stealing my people. I'm going to make my service 50 minutes, mm-hmm. and we're going to do whatever.
So then it's back and forth.
And now it's back and forth.
Yeah.
That's where that comes from.
Yeah.
And it has killed the American church. This is why preachers have fallen, in my opinion, because part of the reason is because it's no longer about preaching the Bible, doing what God has called us to do. It's about It's just about trying to get the next person into my church.
Cheeks in the seats.
And I will do whatever it takes to get you to come and not to leave. Whatever. If you don't want me to preach on the blood and on hell, I won't preach on the blood and hell. Just come to my church. That's all I care about. And that becomes the final goal of being success or failure, is that right there. And that's where that comes from. In my humble opinion, that's where that comes from.
And I agree 100%. And it's driven by insecurity as well, within yourself. And what does the Bible say about comparing yourself to others, right? Paul teaches not to compare yourself with others. Like you said earlier, we all have a calling, and that calling is, even if we're pastors, it's still a different calling for each one of us because we're all different, right? So in 2 Corinthians 10:12, Paul points this out. He says, don't compare. And at the end of the verse, he says, don't be ignorant. He calls this ignorant when you are comparing.
Yeah, it is.
In competition.
It's human nature, because what you're referring to, people were saying, I follow Paul. I follow Apollos. I follow Jesus.
Silas.
And he was like, what's wrong with you? Why are you saying that? That's ignorant.
Yeah, and he was saying it's all about the Lord. So when pastors understand that the kingdom of God is greater than their local church, then competitive feelings will begin to dissipate and they'll begin to go away. And that's all of our goal, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we're here, is we want every church to be successful. Why? Because if churches are successful and doing it the right way, then people are going to go to heaven.
That's right. That's it. So
that's what it's about.
I agree. Number 7, why are pastors falling? Possibly many leaders don't know how to lead, and they get themselves in trouble. Some depend on positional leadership based on their titles rather than functional leadership. So they have to resort to manipulation tactics. They resort to name calling or intimidation, things like that, to try to make their agenda happen. And whenever you begin to do that, it breeds a horrible atmosphere of morale on that leadership structure, and it can get dysfunctional very, very quickly.
No unity.
No unity at all. So God has called each of us, when we are called into ministry, He's called us to walk in humility and to learn from each other and to grow our leadership lid so that we can be more functional for the kingdom. But if I have to resort to scare tactics or intimidation, things like that, then I'm probably also doing some other things wrong in my life as well, because it's not right, trying to force the agenda in an unhealthy way. So here's a couple solutions. Pastors need to find peer communities with compatible visions where they will find a safe haven to receive from and aid them in fulfilling their vision. Denominational presbytery meetings do not necessarily meet this need. What that terminology means is, me going to sectional council is not necessarily what this is referring to. This is referring to a more intimate relationship with other ministers who have who know me a little bit more closely, because those in denominational leadership, they may only see me, like 2-3 times a year, some of them, and so they really don't know who I am. But you got to have a circle of guys that know you a little bit closer.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into the next solution, right? Pastors need one or more other pastors who will coach them, hold them accountable, and speak to the needs of their emotional and inner lives. You mentioned, I think last episode, the MVP.
That's right.
That's that kind of that gives you a chance to, with other lead pastors, and that gives you a chance to kind of just get your emotional needs and kind of you get ministered to, and kind of, gives you that avenue to vent and
That's right.
be poured into.
Another solution to stop this falling, pastors need to have boundaries and firewalls around them and their families so that their personal lives and families will have time to replenish and be renewed. Again, anytime you get tired, you get weary, in any capacity, it makes you weak, and it makes you susceptible to falling to temptation.
Yeah. Next one is pastors need to take care of their physical bodies with regular exercise, some solitude and silence, some rest, and proper diet. I know, you run all the time. I run, not quite like you, but I do run as well. And, I can just look back from my life from 4 years ago. I mean, I lost 30, 40 pounds because of us going on a hike. And I can't tell you how much better I feel now than when I compared to then. And that's just, even then I wasn't an associate pastor. That's just life. It's just taking care of yourself. And when you do those things, you feel better. There's no doubt about it. Much less when you're in this role and doing what we do. You have to take time to replenish your physical body, your spiritual body. We talk about all the time. Let's take some moments, take 30 minutes, take an hour and think. Yeah. And think and pray and meditate. You got to have it.
You do. Yep. Pastors need to take regular times of rest and or sabbaticals. The word sabbatical for some people is controversial, but I'll give you a great example of a sabbatical. Teachers that teach in a public school, they get the summer off. Most of them do. You can do other things if you want to, but for the most part, you get maybe 2 months off, maybe. And so that 2 months is very critical for them so that they can get recharged back up to go and do this teaching that they have to do 5 days a week. And so for a pastor, taking time off, an extended amount of time off, sometimes is very, very healthy. I know guys, I have friends that they'll take the whole month of June off every single year. They do it every single year. Now, I personally don't need that like that. Yeah. What I need isn't June off. What I need is it spaced out throughout the year.
Give you a few days to go hike. Yeah. Recharge.
In the springtime. Yeah. In the summertime. In the fall time. Yeah. That's how I personally do it. I would not feel refreshed if I had to be off for the whole month of June.
Yeah, I recall of a local pastor taking the whole month. Yeah, definitely. The whole month of, I think it was June or July. Yeah. And
I would not be refreshed.
No, I wouldn't either.
I would, eventually, Amanda would probably kill me.
Kick you out the house.
That's probably what she would do. I would go crazy, or I'd probably go start another church or something. I would have to do something because of I don't know, just how I'm wired, I guess. Yeah. But if I can spread it out, that's what works for me. But for somebody else, it may work like that for someone.
Yeah, I mean, you have to still have those moments.
You do. So here's an idea: 1 year for every 7 years of ministry, 1 day for every 7 days, 3 days away for prayer and reflection every 3 months. It's just, that's what people throw out there. And I just thought I would share that with you because that's information that we read sometimes. I don't necessarily agree or disagree with it.
Yeah, with all that,
but it's just.
But that's kind of sabbatical examples. Right. So, next, another solution that pastors need to pay attention to their emotional needs, not just their spiritual lives. And sometimes, even as a man, that can be challenging because a lot of times, we're just not quite wired as emotional as ladies, but even us, we have to make sure as men and as pastors that we take care of our emotional needs.
Yep, and then number 7, pastors need to take care of their intellectual lives. Pastors should prioritize regular times for study to develop their intellect and regular times of devotional reading. Just reading to preach is work, and it will wear you out, and it's not necessarily drawing you closer to God.
And then lastly, last solution that we've got is pastors need to bring their spouses along in all facets of self-renewal and ministry so that there is unity and compatibility of vision in their marriages. And that goes, we've discussed that already. You gotta bring your wife along. She's got to be with you. She's got to be plugged in. She's got to be 100% on board with you. And even in those times when you're resting and renewing and getting recharged. Can't do it isolated.
That's right. So we're going to pause there, and we will pick this back up next. Probably if we don't do it next Tuesday, because we may be out of town next Tuesday, but the following Tuesday we'll pick this back up because there is one more aspect that we have not discussed with pastors falling, and that is this right here. and we're going to explore this. It is, we've talked about the practical side here.
Yep.
But I do believe there may be a spiritual side to this, which is God is exposing the wheat and the tare. God is exposing the sheep and the goats. God is exposing true shepherds and wolves in sheep's clothing. Because I do believe we're in the end times. And I do believe that God is going to come back for a church without spot or wrinkle. And I do believe that the judgment of God starts in the house of God.
That's right.
So I do believe there's another component. These are very practical, but I believe there may be another spiritual component at work, maybe. But we'll discuss it and we'll talk about it and we'll have fun doing it and learn something along the way.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for joining us today. We're going to close it down here. Make sure you like this video, subscribe, pray for pastors, pray for the families that if you read of a pastor who has fallen, pray for their wife, pray for their kids. They're real human beings on the other side of that. Pray for the churches because those are real spiritual lives, man. And we need strong, healthy pastors. We need strong, healthy churches to do God's work here in the last days. John 17, Jesus prayed that we would all be one. And so I'm praying for each of these as if I am personally connected to them because it grieves my soul every time that I see any of these things happen. So thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will see you real soon. God bless.